Hello and welcome to Mr. Seagull's History by Numbers. Today is Thursday the 18th, it's 10:45. So welcome and thank you all for joining. Thank you for joining me on Instagram. Hello, is it Hector? Hello Hector, one of my old students. Hello Lisa, hello Hayden. And I'll get the Facebook comments up running soon as well. So today's class is one that's very important based on what's happening in the world today. So hopefully you'll learn a lot, you'll understand about the past, about civil rights movement, but also have some fun as well, because we want to also make sure that we enjoy the class as well. So I'll make sure I get Facebook comments running up in a second, but let's see, let's have a look at my schedule. Hold on, if I can get the mouse to move. Sometimes the mouse doesn't want to move on me. Lily says she's been learning about Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, and actually we'll be covering her in our class today. So in the session today, so I just want to talk about my general program. So usually I have maths on Monday, but the last few weeks I've had meetings then. Tuesday's geography, and where did we go? I honestly forgot where we went on Tuesday. Did we go to Nigeria? Did we go to Peru? It will come back in a second. We went to Russia on Tuesday, and then on Wednesdays I have my 8 o'clock football quiz. On Thursdays is always my history, and on Saturdays 8 o'clock we have my family quiz coming up. So today's class, hold on one second. Hello Eleanor. Sometimes my PowerPoint doesn't move, I'll tell you in a second. So today's class, we're going to be looking at the history of non-violent resistance and what the sort of context behind Martin Luther King's inspiration was. Then we look at civil rights. Hold on, civil rights in America. If I can get the sound switch off. Civil rights in America in the 50s and 60s. And then we have a dance. And if anyone remembers Sister Act, we're going to do something fun from there, but that's related to the 1960s as well. Then we move on to the I Have a Dream speech, one of the most iconic speeches of not just the 20th century, but I think of all time. So we'll look into that. And then finally, we'll move into the legacy of Martin Luther King and the impact it's had on the immediate period in the 60s and nowadays. So before that, homework. So I wanted to go through the homework that we had. Hello, good morning the Emerys, good morning Martha, everyone's ready to learn. So I've got 2 pages today of homework to show because people are submitting us some great things. So thank you Jessie for joining in and drawing St. Basil's Cathedral there. Then we had Alfie with his first bit of homework. So Alfie, thank you for this wonderful cardboard, almost like Blue Peter style, Great Fry of London depiction. Thank you so much, Alfie. And then Francesca got involved with our dance, our Stuart dance. Thank you so much. Hello Ellie. Hello Ellie. Hello Lucy Stubbs. And then we had our regulars doing the homework as well. We had Oscar with his Russian poster with the Siberian tiger. And then we had Karina, who drew again St. Basil's Cathedral and a great double poster of Russia. And thank you again, Hayden and Lisa. Hayden with his Siberian tiger, and Lisa drawing me as a Siberian tiger. Have you ever seen a seagull as a Siberian tiger? I haven't. So again, if you are doing homework, please submit it, and I'd love to share it, because for me it's the most exciting part. It shows that you're really engaging with the lesson. So I'm going to say hello to Eddie and Ola from Manchester. Hello to Mayuri again. Hello to Francesca. Hello to Andrew Lawton. Hello to Sarah. Welcome. Lots of people. Hello Isha and Rebella. Lots of people here today. Thank you. So I've told you about the class structure today. Non-violent resistance, civil rights, the dance, I Have a Dream, then the legacy, then again, setting my homework for the class, then pay attention, quiz with Bobby, and then thoughts for Mr. C, which is relevant to today's particular class. So again, what we usually have to do is we're gonna have to travel back in time. And do you know how we do that? We're gonna get into our DeLorean car. Are you ready? We're gonna travel back to the 60s. Are you ready? We're going to ramp up the car, 50 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour, 70, 88. Hello! And we have now reached the 1960s. I like the 1960s. So 1960s, lots of amazing things happened. Obviously the civil rights period, but we also had Man on the Moon. We had Beatlemania. So boys and girls, if you think people like One Direction, Little Mix are cool, you've not heard of the Beatles. People are obsessed by them. So, but the important part actually for the 1960s for us is the development of the television. television started becoming something that the masses were able to access. And again, people that were around in 69, my dad, for example, he remembers watching the moon landing on television in 69. And one of the things about television, it meant that people could see what was going on around the world. And particularly relevant to our topic today, if there were injustices, people would watch it on their television, on their news, and they could understand the extent of the issue. In a way in which, of course, you've got the newspapers, but having television had so much more of a powerful impact. So that actually is the context of our period. So Martin Luther King, the person that we're going to look at today, was Dr. Luther King, actually very academic. He jumped up a couple of years in school, so it was a very, very bright cookie. So if University Challenge the quiz show existed back then, he would have been very, very good in it. But Dr. Luther King, he was inspired by reading about people before him. And one person in particular he's inspired by was Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi. And I'll tell you about this person here. So Mahatma Gandhi was a trained lawyer, so understood how the legal system worked. And there's one thing in particular about Gandhi that Luther King was inspired by. I'll talk about that in a second. But you know Gandhi, people often use the word Mahatma Gandhi. Have you heard of that before? His first name, Mahatma. Mahatma. So actually, Gandhi's first name was Mohandas Karamchand. It wasn't Mahatma. Mahatma actually is a word in Sanskrit. So Sanskrit is a Indian language, ancient Indian language. And in Sanskrit, Mahatma means great soul, a great soul. So people called Gandhi Mahatma Gandhi, but that was almost like, not a nickname, but a title they gave him, the Mahatma. So it wasn't his real name, but it means great soul. So in the 1930s, obviously India was part of colonial Britain. And Gandhi wanted to sort of resist against that. And what he said was, rather than fighting using sticks, let's try and resist in a non-violent manner. So one of those most iconic acts of resistance was something called the Salt March. So salt, the basic household substance we pour on our chips. So he said that at the time, the Brits had something known as the salt tax. So salt that was produced in India was taxed. And this meant that obviously it affected affordability for local Indian residents. So what he said is, let's have a march. Let's march against it. Let's get people, and let's not be violent, but let's get lots of us, thousands of us gathered. Let's march all the way through. And then what they did was they marched and they went to a beach, as it were, and they evaporated salt and created their own salt. In essence, defying the salt tax that the colonial Raj had in India. And I'll tell you why this was effective. Because what it did was it forced the authorities at the time to respond to the issues of his grievances. Of course, for example, inequality, jobs, etc. rather than the violence itself. And because of this, other people have practiced non-violent practice. But again, in the era of pictures, television sort of coming through, television a bit before that, but pictures in particular, he became a global name. And Martin Luther King was inspired by this because he thought there must be another way to resist rather than violence. And non-violence was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi in particular. Mahatma Gandhi. Okay. Yes. So that's the inspiration again, and it was the Salt March in particular that Gandhi did. Let's have a look. Hold on. Now sometimes my mouse doesn't move. Here we go. Hold on. There we go. Okay. So now we're going to look at American civil rights. And I'll tell you a story. So in the 1950s, buses were segregated. And again, it's hard for us to imagine now, but there was a section for the front of the bus for white people, and at the back of the bus there'd be a section for coloured people, so black and other ethnicities. And in Montgomery, in the state of Alabama, so it's in the state of Alabama. So Montgomery in the state of Alabama, the rules were the same as everywhere else. They had segregated buses. And then on one day in 1955, a lady called Rosa Parks, she entered the bus. And at the time, when she sat down, she sat in the coloured section. But the white section of the bus became full. So the bus driver ordered Rosa Parks, saying, Rosa, You need to vacate your section and give up your seat for one of the white bus occupants. And she refused to do that. She refused to do that. And I'll tell you the impact of this. People in America who supported civil rights said, that's not right. She should, the buses shouldn't be segregated, and then she shouldn't be forced to give up her seat even though she got on the bus earlier. And what they did was, they did a one-day bus boycott. So a lot of black people and white people would take buses to work. But people who supported civil rights said, let's boycott the buses. So instead of being a one-day boycott, which is the initial plan, ended up going for an entire year. And remember we talked about Gandhian non-violent resistance. For this particular bit, because they resisted by taking the buses, this impacted the bus authorities because for a year they lost income. So black people would travel in carpooling, so sharing cars. And people, for example, there were some white people who had maids, they would drive their maids back and forth from their homes. So people were trying to resist in a particular way through the bus boycott. So the bus boycotts in Montgomery in the 1950s were sort of driving the movement forward. So we can see Martin Luther King was inspired by Gandhi and also by Rosa Parks. Also with Rosa Parks, the sad bit of the story is she was a seamstress. She lost a lot of her employment income and then she was forced to move to Detroit to find employment there. But Rosa Parks is someone that has really inspired many people throughout the world. In fact, in America, I think the Congress has called her the First Lady of Civil Rights. So Rosa Parks is known as the First Lady of Civil Rights. Anyway, if anyone's a fan of Doctor Who, I love Doctor Who. There's actually an episode last year where Doctor Who went back to and witnessed the Rosa Parks incident. So again, Doctor Who and history combining, almost like my perfect narrative. Okay, so we're in the 1960s. We're in the 1960s. And Martin Luther King actually was a Christian minister. And in the 1960s, there was a song that was written in the 18th century called "Oh Happy Day" that ended up having a gospel arrangement. So again, in all my classes, we have a bit of fun as well because we learn some important things. So again, we're going to look at one of my favorite ever films, Sister Act 2. So again, as a Christian minister, I'm sure Martin Luther King would have had times where he was sort of enriched and given joy by singing in a cathedral. So we're going to be singing. We're going to be doing a little bit of. I've got my this is my it's an Oxbridge graduation gown. So we're going to do this. So I've got a question about. I've got some questions coming on Instagram, and I'll try and respond if I can later on. So I've got my gown on. So we're going to do it's more not dancing. It's more like clapping today, but it's clapping. Hello, Liz. Hello, Lorna joining in. So let's have a look at this again. This is more just a joyous part of the film. And Oh Happy Day was a gospel arrangement from the 1960s. Again, the same period in which we're in. So let's have a look at this. Does anyone remember this film?
He taught me how.
I love this film. Again, this song was a 18th century song written by like a Christian priest, but in 1967 it ended up being a gospel arrangement. So there we go. So we'll come back to that. But again, I just thought that was something that would have first arisen in the same period of Martin Luther King in the 60s. So there you go. So a bit of contextual work there. Okay, so now we're going to move on to, I think, the focus of today's event. So it is the I Have a Dream speech. I have a dream speech. If I can get it up in a second. Hold on. Sometimes I'm going to try to control my mouse. It doesn't move. Here we go. Here we go. So this is perhaps one of the most important speeches, not just of American 20th century history, but I think world history. It really did underpin a whole movement. You know, when we look at sometimes movements, periods of history, you have iconic moments, and this speech in particular was iconic. So let's look at the context of it. So in the 1960s, there were economic inequalities as well as that. And Martin Luther King, with supported by other people, they organized something called a March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. A March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And it culminated on the 28th of August 1963. And I'll tell you how many people turned up for this. 250,000 people. 250,000 people turned up for this march in Washington, D.C., so in the capital. And one of the things that Martin Luther King did was he helped unite people, not just black people, but white people supported it as well. So of this 250,000 people, 60,000, so quick bit of maths, 60,000 divided by 250,000 times it by 100 gives us 24% of the people were white people who joined along. And this showed that it wasn't just a movement with black people, it was a movement with whites as well. People are united in trying to bring along equality. We're going to watch the speech now. I'm going to tell you something about the speech. So, obviously there were people who really didn't want to support equality at the time. So, at the time, we're going to hear a bit of the speech. The sound system was actually sabotaged. So, many people on the day of the 250,000, they couldn't actually hear the speech itself. But obviously, we've got a recording of it. They were listening. So, we'll watch the speech and I'll tell you a few facts about it in a second. Let's have a look at the speech.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creeds. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream. My four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
So, one of the things he said was, I have a dream that my four little children will one day grow up in a nation where they're not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. How powerful is that? Because back then, and even again, we can discuss the implications today, people are judged purely on the color of their skin. And he said, actually, I want you to judge people on their content. Are they nice people? Are they people that can contribute to others? And actually, so the I have a dream refrain, and that's what people know it as, the I have a dream speech. But when Martin Luther King, when he drafted the speech, the I have a dream bit wasn't there. It wasn't actually in the speech. He talked to people about, oh, I have this dream one day that we're all equal. But in the speech, when he's delivering it, there was a singer called Malia Jackson, and she'd been having dinner, talk to Martin Luther King. And she said to Martin, when he was speaking, tell them about the dream, tell them about the dream. And then impromptu, he went and said, I have a dream. And then the rest of the speech, as we heard, is history. So that bit wasn't planned. It's amazing. It's one of the most iconic speeches of world history. And yet, the I have a dream bit was ad-libbed. He sat there and Malia Jackson said to him, tell them about your I have a dream. And then he recited that. Again, it shows you how moments of history can be planned, but also the bits where it came from the heart. It came from the heart there. So what was the impact of Martin Luther King? So we're going to look at his legacy. So there's some immediate impacts and then longer on. And I guess the impacts that we're seeing now around the world. So the legacy. So one of the immediate parts was in 1964. In 1964, so we had, president was Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ. So Lyndon Johnson. He signed what was the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act. And what this gave was, it gave everyone, black people and others of different minorities, legal equality. So within the eyes of the law, they were deemed legal. So this is obviously a huge move. And Martin Luther King and his associates and people that supported, blacks and whites, remember, united to bring this through. But obviously you've got legal equality within the eyes of the law, but there still wasn't economic equality, there wasn't housing equality, there wasn't education equality. So of course the law might say it, but all these other factors, where you live, let's have a look, where you live. I'm going to close down a couple of things, hold on. Where you live, your education, your schooling, all those would have been impacted too as well. So Martin Luther King had that immediate impact on civil rights, but 4 years later he was assassinated. And of course we had the great leader of civil rights being taken out, and the immediate impact was people are very upset. And actually, it did cause riots in America. So, we've got the riots today that happened after the death of George Floyd. These riots in America in 1968 were much more intense. But Martin Luther King, what he did show was that he was able to mobilize a mass of people and make a mass movement that was effective. Again, through speeches, through rhetoric, through mobilizing people, blacks and whites, he did help to transform legislation. Again, the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And again, in the context of today's movement, we've seen the death of George Floyd and how people around the world are supporting Black Lives Matter. And I think the key thing is to look within yourself. And that'll bring me to one of our points very soon, later on, about thoughts of Mr. Seagull. Because each of us, people sometimes, we harbour prejudices, we harbour views that perhaps that we might be ashamed of. So think about, if I can change myself, and then ask others, if your friends, your brother, a class friend, if someone says something that you think isn't quite right, are you brave enough to go, was that fair what you said? And I think that's how we should be inspired. We can't all be great orators, we can't all help pass legislation, but what you can do is, again, what I always talk about, impact the people around you. Okay, so time for our quiz now, boys and girls. And parents. Okay, so before that, your 3 homeworks. Again, people have done wonderful homeworks for me recently. So your homework options are, one is, write a speech about equality. Write a really short speech, maybe a paragraph, maybe in consideration of what's happening today. I'd love to see some of your thoughts on a speech. Or secondly, a lot of people do this fabulously, draw 3 things that you've learned today. Or finally, happy day. We'll come back to the end. You can send me that. That's again a really joyous 1960s song. Okay, time for your quiz. Let's see how you're paying attention. So, 3 questions. What household food did Gandhi march about in 1930? So what household food did Gandhi march about in 1960? That's question number 1. Question number 2. In which US state did Rosa Parks inspire the bus boycott? So this is a tricky one. There's 2 parts. There's the place, the more famous, begins with M, and then the state, which begins with A. So which US state? And the third one is, in which city did Martin Luther King give his I Have a Dream speech? So 3 questions. I'm trying to see the answer. I think I momentarily lost my Facebook connection, but let's see what answers are coming through. So, the first one, what food did Gandhi march about in 1930? It was, let's have a look at the answers. A few people coming in. Well done, Oscar. Well done, Mayuri. Well done, Kate. The answer is salt. Salt is the answer. Thank you if you got that correct. The second one, which US state? So it's a bit of a tricky question because there's 2 parts to it. So it was happened in Montgomery. Well done to Catherine, well done to Lisa. But it was in the state of Alabama. So there's 2 parts to that. Well done, thank you for your answers. And then the final one we have, Liz has got it spot on. So Sue, Eleanor. So the last bit, and Lucy Stubbs, it was. So he did it in Washington. There you go. So you learned some of the key facts of this period. Thank you. So you passed your quiz. So what I want to look at is, I said about thoughts of Mr. Seagull. Well done to Roberts as well. So today it's about changing starting within you. Well done, Ellie, as well, for the answer. So what I said was that obviously Martin Luther King, he wanted an equal society. He wanted an equal society where you wouldn't be judged by the colour of your skin, but by the content of your character. And again, if someone's being mean or being a bully, you can say, don't be that, but you can't judge people based on things that they have no control over. And I think, again, especially within the modern day context, it's all about, obviously, you do want to, people lobby their politicians, lobby their MPs, lobby organisations to change. But also it's about thinking about your own habits, your own prejudice. For example, sometimes you might see groups of people and think, oh, those kind of people act in a particular way. But challenge yourself and challenge other people. If you hear people saying things that aren't quite right, your job is, again, you don't need to get aggressive with them perhaps, but just go and say, why did you say that? Again, if you can challenge yourself and challenge others, we can start being the change we want to be in the world. Well, thank you. That's the thoughts of Mrs. Seagull. So again, we always do a bit of Monkman and Seagull. So Monkman and Seagull, it's done for now, but hopefully we'll get a season 3. So again, if you've missed it, all the episodes are currently on iPlayer, and on Mondays at 7:30 they do repeat the episodes. And I want to show you a clip from season 1 actually that you might quite enjoy. The schools of thought are divided between whether you want smooth or dimpled. Smooth ones, when they hit the surface of the water, will be less disturbed. The ones which are dimply flies further.
The fact that there are schools of thought for rock throwing
Yeah.
is a rather surprising one.
So 2 things there. Firstly, what happened to my barber? Did you see that? I had like a haircut that suddenly went to a grade 0. Horrendous. The other thing was, it was quite fun trying to look at the science of stone throwing. And again, it shows you anything you want. The curiosity. You can find curiosity in anything. Stone throwing looks like it's a fun activity. It is. But you can find science, history, maths behind it too as well. So there we go. So again, schedule, we're back on Saturday for our family quiz and the same usual schedule. So again, if people are enjoying, again, your homeworks, please continue to submit them through. And I'm going to start sending out messages to primary schools to get involved, because I know that we've got reception year 1 and 6s. Most people are going back, but other years are still at home. So again, if you are part of a primary school, a teacher, head teacher, let them know about these classes, because I'd love, again, it's brilliant to get people engaging with these lessons. So thank you so much, and again, spread the word so more people can join Mr. Seagull's maths, geography, history, my family quizzes. So thank you so much for your support here. So we're going to get back to our dance, and again, today's class, I think, was one of our most important classes. We learned a bit about the history of Martin Luther King, who he's inspired by, because he was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, which means, enlightened or great soul. We looked at Rosa Parks, how her boycotting of the bus movement was inspired by her saying, actually, just because I'm a black person, I deserve a seat equally on this bus. And the Martin Luther King, how his I Have a Dream speech set the sort of groundwork for the 1964 Civil Rights Act in America. So again, it's about, the world is a difficult place right now. We've had COVID, and we've had the impact of George Floyd's death. But I think it's about trying to educate yourself, understanding what it is, so that you're in a better place to help inspire and support other people around you. But thank you so much. You guys really, it's inspiring being with you, because I know I can't see you face to face, but I can see Sue, Eleanor, Francesca, Oscar, Mayuri, Liz, all of you keep coming back supporting my classes. So thank you so much. It's a privilege to share and learn along with you as well. So thank you so much. So again, we're going to end with Sister Act 2. I feel like I'm going to watch that tonight. Recently I watched Space Jam with Michael Jordan from the 90s. So I'm going to watch Sister Act number 2. And we're going to end with the 1960s song, 1967, Oh Happy Day. I'm going to see if I can sing along with it. Oh Happy Day. So not really a dance, but thank you so much. I've had a brilliant time. I feel like I've learned something. I've understood about the context of what's happening in the world today, and I've had a great time with you guys. So thank you so much. That's Lauren Hill from the Fusion.
Let's party. He taught me how.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Mrs. Rose. Thank you, Instagram, for joining me. Thank you, Ashish. Thank you, Daniel. I've had a brilliant class today. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Francesca. Thank you, everyone on the Instagram. Ashish, Daniel, Patrick, Lisa. Thank you all for joining me, and I'll see you all maybe at the family quiz on Saturday. And please spread the word. Yes, Lauren Hill was in that as well. That's Lauren Hill. That's amazing. There you go. Lots of love from me, Bobby Seagull, and see you all very soon. And don't forget to send in your homework. Lots of amazing homework coming in. Thank you. Bye bye.